just, well, I'd like to know recent history, last 10 years, federal death penalty cases. What was the average body count? Or, yeah, what do I have to do?
What do you have to do to get that?
I know, like Timothy McVeigh, after Oklahoma City, he went to, he waived all his appeals and he went to death row pretty quick. So, and I mean, I know that was a lot of people, but still.
Yeah, that I mean, you have to understand people look at that very, very differently. Something like a terrorism event.
Yeah, to a point, but I mean, there's a lot of people, like people that I grew up with, who looked at him as a patriot, as a hero.
And you know why it went so quickly for him?
He waived all of his appeals. And he still went to trial, though. He pleaded not guilty.
The sheer numbers of what he did.
But I mean, it still didn't go as quickly as I want it to go. It still took, what, 2 or 3 years? The trial, and I mean, but that's because he pleaded not guilty, right? He was,
yeah, there was trials.
And
but
so
people aren't going to think 2 and hundreds of people. They're not going to compare those two. I mean, I'm just telling you the way it is.
It depends how you look at it.
I'm not trying to challenge you. I'm just trying to tell you the way that some people will look at this.
Well, maybe some people, but I'm just saying I just find it hard to believe that the average person is going to look at what he did and for the reasons he did it versus the reasons I do the things that I've done. Not even really in the same.
I guess we're talking about different things.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I think you're.
So it depends on the person, I guess. I guess if you're strictly a numbers person, but let's face it, if you're strictly a numbers person, then George Bush should be on death row right now. So.
And the decision of one man to launch a wholly unjustified and brutal invasion of of Ukraine. Iraq, anyway. 75.
This is what the law says on the federal death penalty, but the things that they see. And they mentioned a couple of cases because I was asking them. I'm passing on information from you, asking them to give me information to provide back. And, okay, well, what kind of cases have you been dealing with? Can you give me some examples of what they've been dealing with where a death penalty was authorized in his movement? And at least as the Attorney General has said, yes, we're going to seek the death penalty.
Right.
And there's a case out of Philadelphia. Kabani Savage is the name, and I printed out an article. This is all public information, but I understand you might not have easy access to these things. So here's a case where they did authorize seeking the death penalty, but it was 12 homicides, including an arson where children were killed. So they're just giving me an idea of the type of bad things that they hear about at capital crimes. Just for your information, you wanted a kind of perspective on things, and they were trying to give me that this is really, really bad. And they see a lot of really, really bad things.
Right.
So that's something that you're free to look at and say.
What's the date on that? It was pretty recent, I think, right?
This is a March 2011 article, but this case is still proceeding.
Okay.
Okay. And this, of course, this gentleman is
it's like
going to go to trial.
Crime or something.
Yeah, those are gang-related activity, and,
all right.
And we're talking. But this is where it says 12 homicides.
All right.
And you told me before when a judge or jury, ultimately hears about all the bad things you've done, you'll have no doubt of their decision. But I just want you to have information.
Right.
Okay. What are some of the other things that you had asked about last time?
When's the last time a federal case actually went through as far as the death penalty was concerned?
Okay, I'll get that information for you.
I was just curious. I mean, I don't imagine there will or there has been a case that's going to be similar to this as far as... I know you said the timeline that I requested wasn't realistic, but... and I guess what I'm wondering is how close a correlation have there been to past cases to what I'm trying to do,
right,
and what the timeline was on those. So,
okay. Well, let's try to. I'm not going to be able to answer them now, but I'm thinking ahead of how I can try to answer those questions. And the more data we have, the better. So this is one data point, right?
Right.
Meaning these guys, what they did was really, really bad, and they're seeking the death penalty. These guys are contesting it, and there's going to be a trial.
Right.
Right. And you said that's different than what you currently intend.
Right. That's. I don't expect that you're going to be able to find something that correlates directly to what I'm asking, but I was just curious how many cases there were. I mean, maybe I can look up some of them too. I know there's a law library at the jail. I don't know if they have records of past cases.
And I think you might be right about there may not be something that's exactly like this.
Right.
So I think what you're saying is probably accurate, and so we
might
can,
not get an idea of the exact timeline, how long things are going to take.
I think that's a pretty good assessment.
Okay. All right.
And that's not because that's just a factual thing.
Right.
We're just not gonna know exactly. But we can certainly communicate like we've been doing.
Yeah.
To move things in the direction that you would like to see them move, while also meeting the obligations that we know just have to be done to protect your rights and to deal with
Right.
everything law enforcement has to deal with.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Are you familiar with this guy Hansen from up in Alaska that was labeled a serial killer that used to capture people? And
Yeah.
it happened right around this Lake Matanuska. I mean, is this a guy that? I mean, do you ever look into any of that stuff about other people like that?
I probably know every single serial killer that's ever been written about. It's kind of a hobby of mine. So.
Okay. Are you familiar with the Hansen guy?
Yeah.
Okay. Is he still alive by any chance?
Yeah, I think so. He was a little before my time, but yeah.
He's in Seward up here.
Okay. I was just curious. I mean, I'm a curious guy, I guess. So once again, I'll say finally, and I appreciate your time.
You've talked before about you read a lot, and that's where you've read about a lot of other serial killers and reading about other crimes and that kind of stuff. Might be a weird question, but who's your favorite? We've talked about it, so we're kind of curious, and we're curious on who your favorite is.
Well, my favorite ones haven't been caught yet, so I guess I don't even know their names.
That's a fair question.
That's actually a good response. Okay, of the ones who have been caught that you've been able to read about, we'll see who was right or who was closest for us.
I don't know. I favorite. I don't really feel like I don't. If what I've read about them is accurate, I don't feel that close to any of them. So I guess I identify most, or my favorite, if you have to put it that way, would be the ones that I identify most with.
Yeah,
So
that's a fair way to say it.
I don't know. Maybe just going off of what I've read, Ted Bundy, maybe. I don't know. Just because I don't have a lot of respect for some of them because of the way they lived, I guess.
Sure.
I don't know. It's weird.
Did
I
you
like reading about all of them, but
Yeah,
as far as
that's
who
why
I identify about them.
when did you start reading about them? When did you realize? I mean, did you start reading about them because you were curious about you, or was it a study guide, so to speak? I mean, that might be a weird question too. Did you learn things from to do, not do, or was it just curiosity of do you have anything in common with them? Is that you were looking for? Do you think?
Well, the first book I read was I think it was called Mindhunter, and it was written by an FBI profiler.
John Douglas, right?
Yeah. I read that years and years ago, probably when I was 15 or 16 maybe. And I was, somewhat disturbed by it just because, I don't know, it's always been that way. It's always felt like I was kind of reading about myself in a lot of those books. Not the myself that everybody knew, but
What did that? I mean, did that worry you, concern you, make you think it was?
Well, at first, I was, like I say, at first I was pretty conflicted about it, but that was all just because of the way I'd been raised and stuff. And, you know, I grew up with good people. I was never, you know, everybody's always nice to each other and everything's all sunshine and roses, and so that's why it was disturbing to me, because it seemed like for a long time I either thought everybody else was faking it and everybody was like me, they just didn't act like it, or I figured that I was, you know, like, demon child or whatever, I don't know. But I mean, all that went away when I was in my 20s. I didn't feel bad about it anymore.
You didn't feel bad that you had those thoughts.
I knew that most people didn't think the way I did by then. I just didn't feel bad about thinking differently at that time. I didn't.
Just kind of accepted that that's who you were, and that's...
Yeah, I just...
Do you know? So you said Ted Bundy. You kind of felt like maybe you had some things, or at least in common with, or something. Do you know stuff about him? Do you study?
I know that he had a lot of. He was very sexually motivated in the stuff that he did, and I know that in the last few years he had a really hard time controlling himself and separating his two lives, if you want to call it that, and I also identified with him because it seemed like he was able to separate his two different aspects, or whatever you want to call his personality. I don't know.
Anything specific about his crimes?
No, honestly, like I said, I never really, from what I've read anyway, I never felt that close to any of them. I just saw similarities in all of them.
How about from studying Bundy and other people on things that they did that either got them caught or that you thought was a bad idea that you stopped doing or don't do or didn't, because of that? I got lots of those kind of ideas, like what not to do, from books and movies and true crime TV. Yeah, there's no shortage of what not to do. If I had, like I say, if I'd been following my own rules, yeah. Like, do you know, for Bundy, for instance, do you know enough about him to know where he was doing things and those kind of things? Do you know those details on him?
Yeah, I know. I know serial killers all the way back to my other serial killer hero, I guess, not really even relevant because he was so long ago, was H.H. Holmes. He was pretty much a genius, but back in his day it was pretty easy to be a genius because nobody really expected stuff like that back then, so he got away with it for a long time.
And no technology really to have to outsmart.
Right. Back then you could hire other people to build dungeons for you and nobody would even think twice about it. It's like, oh, that guy wants a dungeon. Well, anything I build like that nowadays, I kind of have to do myself.
That kind of warrants an obvious follow-up question of, do you have a dungeon? Have you ever built anything like that?
No, nothing that elaborate.
Something you would have liked to have, though.
Oh, I had plenty of plans for them. It's not really. It's more my retirement plan.
Some of this stuff, I think you said you've been reading, and I know these guys, different of us have been reading the different things on serial killers. Is that something that did you read about specific serial killers, or just the fiction? Like, just have an interest in that kind of?
No, I was more interested in the real life thing.
The real, like, books about specific people, like the BTK.
Right, the case. Well, yeah.
But
case studies.
On BTK, is that one of them, or not so much?
He wasn't one of my favorites, no.
Green River. We've already established.
He was interesting. I know all of them. I mean,
You know all.
even the ones. I was more interested in the older stories, like turn of the century.
Okay, like going way, but like Jack the Ripper, that far back.
Well, Jack the Ripper's not that interesting because they never caught him, but yeah, there's just a different. It was everybody thought of it as a new phenomenon back then. That's what made it interesting.
But it wasn't.
Well, there just weren't. Genocide was becoming unpopular, so serial killers had to find something else to do. But yeah.
What was the most interesting ones that you read about?
Holmes was one of them.
Tell me about Holmes.
Holmes was, I think, turn of the century, 1900.
Where?
He had a castle dungeon combination in, I think it was Chicago, and he would give free room and board to people who were coming to the World Fair there. And he was a doctor, a medical doctor, I think, or at least he'd been to medical school. I don't know if he was ever practicing. Anyway, essentially, he had his house designed as a body processing factory. He would invite people to stay in this nice castle in these rooms, and had gas plumbed into the rooms, and greased chutes down to the basement. We'd sell their skeletons to drugstores and medical schools and stuff.
How did he get caught?
Pinkertons, I think. Pinkerton Detective Agency. They tracked him. He was. He went all across the United States. He essentially kidnapped one of his girlfriends or wives' kids or something, and took them all across the United States with him. By the time he got back, none of them were with him anymore. And that's what got people asking questions. And the Pinkertons backtrailed him and eventually found, I think, most of the remains. He was interesting because he was pretty sane individual. He looked at it as more of a business enterprise kind of thing, even though I would say probably unquestionably he was doing it for more than that. But
how did people? Are there books written on him? Did he write a book? Did other people write on him?
No, I read some books about him, and then they recently I just dug up a bunch more information on him too. So
Where did the information come
Most recent information on him, I think I watched it on TV, but prior to that, I had read about him in a couple different books.
What's his first name?
I don't know. His initials were H.H. Holmes, I think.
Who else are the interesting names?
It's all interesting reading.
Why didn't you like BTK?
He was a hag.
I mean, a number of years he seemed to get away
He
with
got
it.
away with it for a long time. That was the most disappointing thing about him, is that he never had to get caught. He just got bored, so that he was too much, he was too soft in his old age to actually go out and do anything again, so he decided to go the publicity route without actually doing anything again. That's what was disappointing. He was also pretty unusual in that he was able to stop.
Yeah, for a number of years.
That's why I think that, plus I saw the live prison interview, and my impression of him, his personality is that he was actually sorry for the things that he had done younger, kind of like repented or thought he was repenting of his ways kind of thing. And
You think that was
I
for
don't know,
real,
maybe
or
he
was that a
found,
show?
I think it was for real. Because honestly, I don't think if he really didn't believe that he was repenting of his sins, I don't think he ever would have stopped. Because he stopped for like 20 years. I don't know, in my mind that's impossible. But
Why do you say that?
it's just because of the way he killed people. It's a pretty obsessive, compulsive act to kill someone that way. It's not like you're a gangbanger doing a drive-by or something. So,
How long do you think it'd be reasonable otherwise to go before killing someone?
Well, from my perspective, hindsight's 20/20, but my perspective, my only regret is that I tried to have as much self-control as I did, because I'm happy about the life I've lived, and as long as I got away with it. But that being said, it was considering that's all I have now, it'd be better to have more memories.
So do you think that's a part of the memories part?
It is now.
Well, it is now. It's never was a consideration before. I was more interested in the next plan. Mm-hmm. And that's, I don't know, from what I've read, that's a pretty common theme. It's
What theme?
with most serial killers, if you will, that I've read about, they nothing ever goes exactly as planned, and so, or maybe it does, but you're in your mind, you up the ante as far as who or where or what happens, the order, the way things happen, how long it goes on. That's what constantly kept me obsessed with whatever the future might hold, as opposed to things that happened in the past. That, and being tempered by the fact that I was always thought I had it all figured out. It was like, just don't do anything around, close to home or whatever. So.
What do you think was able to give you that self-control?
I didn't have any self-control.
I thought you said you tried to have.
I tried.
And what would you do to help yourself?
Well, there's other outlets, you know. But I'm just saying, like BTK, for example. That's why that whole story. He must have found a really interesting hobby to have for those 20 years, because either that or he was, like I say, truly repentant or sorry, or decided because that doesn't make sense.
Or nobody knows what happened during those 20 years.
No, he was a publicity hog. So I think if he had done something, he probably would have told people about it.
No, in one place too. And it was all around Kansas, I think, too. He didn't really travel that much.
Right.
One of the things that seemed that I read, it was kind of interesting, was one of the features of certain types of serial killers is excessive driving.
Yeah. I think I don't know. I had some theories about him. Seems like at some point, he killed a whole family and had to kill some kids that were pretty young.
Mm-hmm.
I could see where that could possibly, like, if I had ever been put in that situation.
Didn't change.
If there was anything that would have changed anything about me, that's possibly the one scenario.
That was his very first killing, though. When he killed the family. It was his first time.
See, that's what I wasn't sure. If
Yeah.
it was his first, you know, to me that would explain it if that was his last. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
You said you tried to avoid those situations, though, more and more, anyhow, after Laney.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't have to make sense. It just has to make sense to me.
Or to the person. Yeah. What other characteristics do you see in the other serial killers you've read about? Like what other?
I don't know. Some of the more recent ones I don't really know that much about, but like Green River, he was probably the most prolific, certainly in modern times. And but it seems like he might have been another one who the last few years he wasn't doing anything when he was finally caught. I know he was already married and settled down, but I think he had been married for part of the time. That was always, I was always interested in those individuals that had to lead that life. It's not easy.